In this lesson, we'll go through an overview of Eclipse debugging capabilities, and you'll use your first app to explore debugging features. So please bring up Eclipse with your first app workspace, as I've done. Now, open your main activity Java file by double-clicking in the Package Explorer window. Then click on the Debug tab. And recall that along the top is a strip of tool buttons. You can mouse over the buttons to display descriptions. If you'd like to customize the toolbar, click on Window, Customize Perspective, and make your selections. To explore the capabilities of Eclipse debugging, we need to have your app running. So first, we're going to set a breakpoint where we'll pause execution. Let's set a breakpoint on the setContentView method. To set a breakpoint, double-click in the gray area to the left of the statement at which you want to pause execution. And breakpoints pause execution before processing the statement you highlight and set as a breakpoint. If you look up in the breakpoint window in the upper right, you'll see the breakpoint also appear there. Now let's click the Debug button, and that should start your emulator. After your emulator starts, you should see the setContentView statement become highlighted. This means that execution is stopped at this point prior to executing the statement. In the virtual device emulator, you see that the text in the center of the screen isn't showing because the setContentView method didn't execute due to our breakpoint. Now minimize the emulator and go back to Eclipse. If you were using the breakpoint to debug your code, you could check the variable values up in the upper right in the Variables window. You'd be able to verify if everything is executing the way you expected. When you finish these checks, you'd click the Resume Execution button here. We're not going to do that because we want your app to remain paused while we look at the debug windows and capabilities. So let's now take a quick tour of the debugging windows. The debug window here contains information about threads running as a part of your app execution. If you expand a thread, you see the methods that were executed. Here's our onCreate method, and we'll learn more about threads in an upcoming lesson. Notice that when you click on a method, for example, our onCreate method, you see information appear in the Variables window off to the right. And if you click on a variable, you see a bit more information below. The Variables window details the contents of variables used in your app, either those you create with your code, or as we see here, variables created by various system methods. The Breakpoints window contains our single breakpoint on the onCreate statement. The Main Activity Java window contains our Java code. The Outline window contains an outline of our Java code. The Console window contains messages from the Android system, such as those for launching activities. The Task window tracks reminders that you can add by right-clicking on the window, clicking on Add Task, keying in a description, and clicking OK. To add a task associated with an element in your code, highlight the code. Let's use our setContentView statement, right-clicking in the gray bar, and clicking Add Task, and OK. The Problems window tracks Android errors, and we don't have any showing at the moment. The Executables window shows executable files that can be imported into Eclipse. Right-click, click on Import, and go to your file system and pick out a file. We won't be using this window. The Logcat window here in the lower right displays messages logged by the Android system and those you create from within your app, often to help you with debugging. I'm going to expand that window so we can take a closer look at it. There are a number of levels of messaging severity shown in the drop-down here, from verbose down to assert. So if the selector is set to verbose, you get all the categories. If it were set to warn, you would get messages with a warn error or assert categorization. And you can use the search file here to search for message text content. So for example, if we put in the word content, we see that it's filtering messages with that word in the text. Now let's minimize that window. And now we click on the Resume Execution button here. And if we pull up our virtual device emulator, you see that the display text now shows in the center of the screen because our set content view statement has been executed. So that's a quick overview of Eclipse debugging capabilities, and we'll learn more about debugging in Eclipse in coming lessons.